you better believe we're talking about this today. If you haven't joined me on Instagram, join me over at EMWILSS. I got an email, we'll call her Nadia. I'm gonna read most of it because a lot of it's really important. I'm not gonna read the whole thing, but this is what she said. She said, "Dear Emily, I have decided to save sex for marriage, and as a college student, this has been difficult to say the least, but so far I have managed to stay true to my promise. However, I have talked to some of my friends who have had sex and their stories have scared me. They talk about their first time as awkward and painful. They all know I want to save myself for marriage and admire my decision, but have confided in me that this will be hard because they say they think that saving oneself for marriage is a beautiful decision, but have said things like, I think what you're doing is great, but just know that your wedding night will probably be painful and awkward. I couldn't walk for days after my first time, so just know that your honeymoon is going to be more painful than beautiful and fun. Their words have worried me. I don't want my wedding night to be awkward. Do you have any advice for me?" Yes, I do. As a matter of fact, I do. This is a very multifaceted issue, okay? There's a lot of different facets to this topic, to this conversation. I cannot cover all of those facets in one video. There's no way. But I want to speak a little bit to this today because stuff like this, real talk, drives me crazy. Let's get one truth out of the way first. The only person who can speak to what it will be like to be a virgin on your wedding night is someone who was a virgin on their wedding night. Plenty of people can speculate about what it can be like or will be like based on their own experiences, but anyone who has not made that choice and lived that does not know and cannot speak to that experience. That is a fact. In case you're new here and you didn't know, my husband and I were both virgins on our wedding night. We can speak to that. Both of us do not regret that decision for 1 second. This is public information, and I read him this email and got some of his thoughts about it and asked him if I could share a little bit about this because, you know, it's our life together and I think that's really important. And he told me that I could share about it, and he added some of his perspective as well. There's so much to share about this, so I'll probably break it down into a few videos, but here's what I want to share with you about this email today. First things first, there is a huge difference between having sex with a guy who maybe is your guy friend, maybe you don't know, maybe who is your boyfriend, and your husband. There is a huge difference. The man who has said to your face, I will love you and honor you all the days of my life. The man who lays down his entire life to you, says vows to you in front of your entire group of friends and family, unless you elope, that is a completely different thing. Why? Because there is a huge difference in sharing something so personal, so private, so intimate with a man who has promised nothing to you and a man who has promised his entire life to you. The entire scenario is different. Mentally, spiritually, emotionally, the whole thing. Physically, the act is the same. But mentally, spiritually, and emotionally, it's a whole different story. When Daniel and I said our vows to one another, it was like, oh yeah, things have changed. No, everything changed. We laid down our lives for one another. We vowed to love one another till death do us part. That is no small thing. That changes everything, which makes way for the second thought that I have about this email, which is that everything changed. The moment Daniel and I laid down our lives for one another, everything changed and made way so that on my wedding night, I had absolutely no reservations. I had no reservations whatsoever about what I was about to take part in with my husband. And I wasn't asking myself, is this a bad idea? Am I gonna get pregnant? Am I gonna get an STD? We're not even in a relationship. What does this mean? I wasn't saying, gosh, am I gonna regret this? Like, what am I supposed to do now? If I do that, is he gonna think X, Y, or Z of me? Or if I'm not good at this, is he gonna think X, Y, or Z of me? I wasn't thinking any of those things. I had no questions, I had no qualms, I had no reservations about what was going to take place between my husband and I. I knew that I wouldn't regret it. I knew that it was a beautiful part of marriage, something that we were entering into together. The lack of hesitation, the lack of questions, the lack of, oh my gosh, am I gonna regret this, or is he gonna think this about me, made me feel at peace and made me feel really, really comfortable as a woman. I didn't have any of those reservations, which made it so that I could be at peace, so that I could be calm, so that I wouldn't have to be worrying about any of those things. That the thing that I could focus on was loving my husband, and that is it. The third point that I want to make to this video, out of like the 50,000 points that I want to make about it, is that awkward is never and never will be a word that I would use to describe my wedding night. And when I read Daniel this email, he said, I would not describe our wedding night as awkward at all. It wasn't awkward at all. And I said, me either. That is never, ever, ever a word I would use to describe my wedding night. Why? Because I was with a man who loved me. A man whose utmost concern, honestly, for the night was that I would feel comfortable. And there's 3 words that I always use to describe my wedding night and how I felt that day and the day after. I felt loved, and I felt safe, and I felt free. I knew that I didn't have to be good at anything at all. I knew that we had our entire lives to work on the physical aspect of our relationship and to enjoy the physical aspect of our relationship. And I knew deep in my heart that my husband's main concern for that night was me being comfortable, me being at peace, me just feeling very, very relaxed. And that was a very good thing. And that made way for me feeling loved and safe and free. And that is something that's like so hard to put words to, that love and that safety and that freedom. Again, that someone who saves sex for marriage can speak to very directly, that I can speak to that very directly, that Daniel can speak to that experience very directly. We had conversations about what we'd imagine that night to be like and our expectations. And we talked about everything before we got married, which everybody should. We talked about everything. Is there truth to the fact that your wedding night physically may be uncomfortable if you have never had sex before? Yeah, probably. That is natural, that is normal, that is 100% okay and normal and to be expected. Are you not going to be able to walk for a week like this girl says? I certainly have never heard anything like that. I couldn't walk for days after my first time. I've never heard anything like that before. Physically, might it be uncomfortable? Yes. For the first couple of times, maybe. Yes. That is absolutely natural and normal. But when those aspects are there, that aspect of that vow, that aspect of no reservations, that aspect of knowing that you're marrying a man who really deeply cares about you being comfortable, about you being relaxed, about you being peaceful, all of those facets are so important and something that shouldn't be dismissed, and that I like sharing with you guys and want to share with you guys because nobody talks about that. People will tell you all the time, oh, it's going to be so awkward, oh, it's going to be so awful. They have no idea what they are talking about. They don't know, because unless you have those aspects of that vow, of that lack of reservation, of that lack of awkwardness, because you're with your best friend, the person who's promised their life to you, there's just no way to know what that experience is like unless you have experienced that firsthand. Another piece of that puzzle is that it's important to have a healthy and good and beautiful understanding of the beauty of sex, and that's probably another video for another day. But a lot of people share these horror stories where they viewed or were brought up to believe that sex was a dirty and bad thing, and then all of a sudden they got married and they couldn't get out of their mind that sex was a dirty and bad thing, so their physical intimacy in their marriage was affected negatively by that. It is very, very important to cultivate a healthy and beautiful and good understanding of the nature of sex, of the fact that it is designed as a good and beautiful thing. That is something that is absolutely key for physical intimacy in marriage, in going into marriage, perhaps if you've never had sex before, of understanding that it's a good and beautiful thing in the right context, in the context of marriage that it was designed for. I have so much more to say, but if you're saving sex for marriage, if that's a choice that you made for your life, you know who you should be listening to? People who have and people who did make that decision, and you can ask them. Ask them for their wisdom. Ask them what they might have done differently. Ask them what they wish they would have known. Ask them, because they can share with you the reality of the decision that you are making, the reality of what your wedding night could be like, because they made the same decision that you are trying to make in your life right now, or have made in your life right now. And that is very, very important, that we choose wisely who we listen to, whether it's your youth minister or your aunt or your mom or your sister or your friend or whatever. People who made that choice and can speak to that choice and can speak wisdom and experience and knowledge into your life on that choice. Don't be listening to your friends who just want to scare you. Say, I admire your decision so much, but it's going to be awful. It's going to be so awkward. Don't listen to people tell you what it's going to be like for you to save sex for marriage if they have not saved sex for marriage themselves. It is so important to listen to people who have. So plenty more to say. There's like branches to this, and I kind of like touched on some of those branches. So we'll save that for another day. I just had to tell you that today. That's all for today. I'll talk to you soon. Bye.